Hi everyone, and welcome to The Advocate. I'm your host, Glenn Allen. Today in the program, we're going to be talking about marijuana and its effect on youth. We're also going to talk to a man who had his life torn apart by marijuana and marijuana alone. Joining me in the studio tonight are the founders of Living Rock, and I'll tell you something about Living Rock. If you haven't heard about Living Rock in the Hamilton area, well, I don't know where you've been living or where you've been, but certainly Living Rock has been helping youth and youth at risk for a number of years, 28 to be exact. And I want to talk about Living Rock and what they've done and what they've meant for the youth at risk. And right now I'm going to introduce the founders of Living Rock, Karen and Al Craig. Welcome to the program. Good to be here. Yeah. And I added that little bit to the beginning. I was going pretty well there. But I think so much of what you guys do over at the Living Rock, and what we're going to talk about today has such an impact on, or has had an impact on the folks who you've been taking care of for over 28 years now. You know, people talk about, and I really tire of listening to the naysayers of the negative effects that pot has on people, because you guys see it on a daily basis with youth, let alone adults. And so let's talk about that, and then Al, we're going to talk to you about your story, because you weren't always a pastor. And actually, folks, a lot of what the Living Rock is today spawned from Al's story and from where he came from. So that's where we're at today. So if you can, well, Karen, you're the addictions counselor. You're the program director.
Yes.
If I could start with you and ask you, with the clients, with the, I don't know, we don't like calling them clients because they are people, they're human beings, and they're young.
Yeah.
I mean, you think it's bad enough as an adult going for treatment, and not bad enough, but as a struggle. But think about going for that as a youth, or a youth on the street, living on the street, and you welcome them to Living Rock and help them get back on their feet. But what do you see? How does marijuana play in their lives?
Well, it's a huge part, and for sure, I mean, their peers are using, like you said, it's really difficult. They may not have a job yet, and that's why the Rock and some of the programs are so important, because we are offering them opportunities to get busy and focused. They may feel like it's the one way that helps them cope with anxiety and stress of being on the streets, being homeless, dealing with very tough stuff in their lives, loss and grief, and problems that the youth are going through. So they feel like, kind of the theme in our community, a lot that I'm hearing is that it helps anxiety. But I'm seeing the opposite. I talked to a girl last week and I said, do you not see though that you're high and happy and energized, and then at times there's a complete emotional meltdown and there's real problems. And if they don't have drugs, you know, they're gonna feel also those cravings and feel angry and agitated, tracking pot too, right? So that's the other thing. So yeah, I see a huge impact, and that's why I really care about this drug. I've had a passion to really talk more openly about this drug. I mean, we're not talking about people that are using medical marijuana for glaucoma and cancer and other things.
No,
we're not even talking about that. We're here talking about youth with developing brains. And I mean, all the brain research is now saying your brain is developing right up to 25. We're not even talking about the Facebook that went out there that said that you might see schizophrenia and other things if you use before you're 18. We're talking about youth where there's brain development right up to 25. And you're dealing with a drug here that potentially is impacting, I mean, it goes to it sits in the fat cells, so your brain, sexual glands, and your heart. Like this drug impacts, you know, those fatty areas. It absolutely is impacting your brain and compromising your brain. So it's a very important drug to look at with youth. And I don't think we're hearing a lot about it in the community, really, So I'm really glad you've had us on today to talk about this a little bit.
Well, it is. It's so important because of the recent research. You know, you and I are really going to get into this, and Al. I mean, the THC levels, you know, back in the Woodstock days and what have you, 1 to 2%, and I know none of us can relate back to those days. We were just babies. But research from back then talks about 1-2% of the THC level. It's upwards of 30% now.
Absolutely.
And in some cases higher.
So it's a different drug.
Yeah, it is. And so that and the fact that the dangers of that marijuana possesses towards behavioral disorders and the ADD and the ADHD and all that, we're going to be talking about that. But Al, I want to bring you into the conversation because you have a very interesting story in that, you know, before you got into some of the harder drugs, pot was a big part of your life, and probably, you know, as we discussed earlier, probably the one that scared you the most. Why is that?
Well, I started into smoking pot when I was about 12 years old because my older brother, who was a biker, and you know, and I looked up to and admired. He was always had these strangely looking cigarettes in his cigarette pack that had twisted ends to them. So I thought, you know, I wouldn't mind trying some of those. And when I first started smoking it, it was great. I used to laugh a lot. I'd have the munchies. I would, you know, like to party and socialize. By the time I was doing that, the time I was about 18 years old, so I'd been smoking for about 6 years. Every time I smoked, even just a couple of tokes or to take a couple of drags, I would feel really paranoid where I couldn't speak to people. I thought everybody was a police officer, or everybody was out to get me or rob me or didn't like me or whatever. I remember being at a party one time, and I was with all my friends, and this was a really happening party, and I couldn't speak. I just clammed right up where I couldn't even communicate with anybody. And to the point where I didn't even know, I was basically catatonic. I didn't feel like I could even move. And later when I left with my friends, they were like, well, what's the matter with you? Like, you know, I was starting to come down a little bit, and I couldn't even explain it. And I realized this is a very harmful drug. In my generation, we used to believe that the cannabis was absolutely harmless. There was no effects to it. You couldn't be addicted to it. You couldn't, you know, it was actually good for you is what we believed. Alcohol was the bad thing. You know, the heavy drugs, you know, that was for drug addicts and losers, even though that's what I got into later. But pot, you know, that was the hippie thing. You know, this is in the 70s. That was a thing we just did when, you know, and that was cool and harmless and just made you mellow and took all the anxiety away. I found it actually was the complete opposite to that. At the beginning, yeah, that was the case. Later on, I would if I didn't find something else like MDA or speed or meth, I couldn't handle pot on its own because it would make me so paranoid to the point of feeling suicidal. And
But you kept using, and that's the other thing that's interesting. You'd still go smoke a joint with your friends and have this paranoia.
Oh yeah, because it was such a part of culture, and I think it still is. You know, with youth.
That's the addict part.
Yeah, if you didn't partake of it, you know, I sometimes would cringe inside when somebody sparked up a joint, and because I would have to when that joint came around. I'd have to smoke it, or else I would be considered to be not cool or not part of that circle, right?
Exactly.
And I even tried for a while. I was telling you earlier, I tried for a while to sell it because I knew if I had it, I wouldn't partake. I wouldn't smoke it all, smoke all the profits. But that didn't even work because I was always giving it away, and there's this communal thing where everybody's sharing the pot, and you know, it's all one big happy community. And I found it became very, very dysfunctional. And that's when and I'm not advocating to do this to make life changes, but when I first started the process making life changes, it was when I was really high, and I realized if I keep doing this, I'm going to end up committing suicide or doing something just crazy because of the fear and the paranoia that gripped me as a result of taking it.
Yeah. One of the things, excuse me, one of the things that we talk about, I've talked about on other shows, is, and you bring this up in what you just said, more so today, is that pot is cut with or sprayed with, as they're growing, with crystal meth. There's different things. I mean, there's stuff here. I mean, pot can be laced with whether it's crystal meth, GHB, PCP, ketamine. Ketamine. I mean, a lot of people are sitting there, oh, what's ketamine? I mean, it's an animal tranquilizer.
Yeah.
You know,
PCP, I think,
you know, yeah.
horse tranquilizer, right? Originally,
You're right. And but really, I mean, the kids are going out, and they don't know. I used to work in a group home, and I'd say to the guys, so you don't know who you're getting your stuff from.
Yeah.
And I'd try to talk to them about where they're picking. Well, it's only pot. Well, it's not only pot. Marijuana. It's the whole deal. I mean, years and years ago, and hopefully I'll get this right. It's been a while since we talked about this, but I mean, first of all, it's a multi-billion-dollar business for organized crime.
Yeah.
And it used to be that you'd send a couple of kilos or 4 kilos of pot, Canadian pot, over the border, and you get back a couple of kilos of cocaine. Now, what they're doing with Canadian pot, and what they've done with it, 4 kilos of pot is going over the border, and you're getting 4 kilos of cocaine back plus guns. So what does that tell you about what's on the street here?
Yeah, and I've appreciated that about you. And in our breakfast program, we have breakfast 5 days a week at Living Rock, and they read the Hamilton Spectator together. And I look at those articles, and when they're picking up pot, they're often picking up guns and other drugs also as well. So I do appreciate that, and I always appreciated when you brought that out too. What using drugs connects you with, where that connects you. So I encourage the youth to look at those articles and to see that
because
piece.
the whole perception, I've talked to youth that have said that they've quit drugs, completely quit drugs. And the only thing I do now is I smoke some pot to keep myself mellow. And how do you respond to that? Because you don't have any
and
idea.
they believe it
actually,
makes them mellow,
yeah.
and I understand that. They honestly believe that. And it is, you know, after it's in your system still like 3 to 5 days. So potentially they may go 3 to 5 days, and then they're irritable, edgy, trouble. But they don't connect that at all to pot. They believe that it's the pot that makes them mellow and calm. I remember a guy told me, he says, Karen, if I quit this drug, you got a monster on your hands because there's not an anger management program that can work for me. This is the only drug that keeps me sane. When he got away from that, he absolutely was much calmer, much more able to problem solve and listen to people's perspective. He had way more energy. You know, it was a huge positive effect, but he had to take, I mean, it's still in your system, even up to 6 months. So, I mean, you don't really know what you look like till way out the other end, right? So
well, that's the whole, that brings up a whole other look at what youth have to do, because when you look at withdrawal management and detox, well, you can't, you have to be a certain age going into detox.
Right.
I believe you have to be 16 and older.
Yeah, we've had there's been a lot of difficulty getting youth into adult detox.
Yeah, I think it's 16. It might be 18, could be 16.
18 more so.
I think it might be 18.
Yeah, it might be 18. I think you're right. I should know that, but sorry.
I mean, Mac has a drug-induced psychosis clinic, and there's stuff happening, you know.
But there
with
needs to
young
be
people.
like in Kitchener. In Kitchener, there's a youth detox. There's a youth drug and alcohol treatment center. There's, if we're going, we don't put young offenders in with adults.
That's right.
We can't be putting youth in with adults.
It's not
We
effective.
have to the entire system has to be looking at what we're doing for youth, and we have to have mimic programs for young people in order for them to have a chance. Listen, we have to take our first time out, but when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation about marijuana and youth, and we're going to go further into Al Craig's story about his use with pot when he was younger. Back right after this. And welcome back to The Advocate. I'm Glenn Allen alongside Karen and Al Craig, and today we are talking marijuana and its effect on our youth. Guys, just before we went to break, we were talking about the potential for detox for young people. I know it's kind of just throwing you under the bus here, but what has to happen before somebody does something about this? Because it's happened, like I said, it's happened in Kitchener. But this is a big city here in Hamilton. What happens before somebody takes care of the kids?
We should talk and look at it for sure. The accountability is critical, and that's one thing that the Rock we are able to do. Youth are coming right out of rehab and right out of custody and connecting in the Rock and getting busy and focused. And that's the thing, it's that early recovery, making changes, proper eating and rest, and those first 7 days, getting through that, getting support. So we do feel that the coaching is critical, the one-to-one support, and the getting busy. Youth need to get busy, get working, feel like they've got purpose and vision in their lives. So we have work crews right after breakfast, and some of our highest risk youth just love those programs where they can get in work, get cooking with our cook Gail, get busy and focused. But I do think it's a critical issue that we should talk about more as a community. We get talking more together about what some of the needs might be.
And I'm glad you said what you did, because I wanted you to pick up on that and talk about what the Rock does, because you pick up a lot of the slack, but where it comes time to actually withdraw, where in Hamilton do the kids go to actually do that?
I don't know. I mean, I think they're doing it like on their own. I don't know that they're.
There really isn't. I think there's alternatives for youth that specialize on youth with addictions. In terms of facilities, there really isn't. I mean, there's youth hostels that will help youth get off the streets, but in terms of dealing with any kind of an addiction, and especially like a marijuana addiction, it's not society's, the message society gives towards cannabis is that the youth are getting and are saying to me, well, even they're decriminalizing it, they're making it out to be, there's popular articles that we've read recently in mainstream magazines that are talking about how this is a harmless drug. People are even not wanting to call it a drug anymore because of it. So for them to start facilities or open facilities to address addictions in cannabis where there really isn't, our society is saying that this isn't an issue. And we're seeing that it is. And we're seeing that it is causing a huge problem within youth culture.
You bring up a really great point, and there was a time when there wasn't really much of a withdrawal from pot.
Right.
But today, addiction counselor, there's a huge withdrawal from pot, and it's both physical and mental.
Mental, yeah. Yeah, I went on
and this is what a lot of people don't understand.
I watched a video and a boy said, I don't know how, I watched this boy just talking, I don't know how you can say this thing's not addictive. I'm completely unable to pull back from this thing. So yeah, no, it's very important that we talk and look at it. And like you said, with all the adding and things that could be laced, how it can be laced, it's really important. It's not a pure drug for sure.
And learning to cope without it too.
Yeah, and coping, yeah.
You know, like you may not go through physical withdrawal, but you have used this as a coping mechanism for so long. Now you're trying to cope without it, you know.
Well, you have to deal with, the big thing is these kids are using pot, alcohol, and other drugs for a reason. All of a sudden, you take those things away, and as many of us know, there's a reason we're doing those things. There was in my case, right? So all of a sudden, these guys and gals are being asked to come to talk to their counselors, open up, and talk about some of the most horrendous things that have ever happened in their life, and not self-medicate.
Yeah. It's hard because we talk about coming out of the fog, and they really start talking about some of that stuff, and just kept the lid on, just kept things tolerable. And now they got to talk about some of that stuff. You're right. That's a really important.
It's hard enough. It's hard enough to do as an adult, and you know, most folks know. I went through drug and alcohol rehab and what have you, and I'll tell you, watching adults go through that, I can't help but stress this. It's hard enough as an adult going through this stuff. Now you're asking kids who have gone through stuff that you can't even imagine. And you're asking them to put down their drugs of choice. You're asking them to put down booze, get clean and sober, so that they can deal with some of the vile things they've been through.
I think the Rock community helps because you're talking to volunteers and staff in eating together, we're working together, we're cooking together. I think the closed door session thing is really difficult, but as they build trust and relationship in the work crews and in the work, that's where the rapport is built, and then it's a little easier to talk. Like, I've had students go, I can't believe how much that youth is talking as we're cutting carrots together for the evening dinner program. It is amazing how when you have an opportunity as a youth to build rapport and you're not asking them to go into a closed door counseling session, it really does help them too.
And that's so true. In working with some again, young offenders or kids in a group home, being able to do stuff one-on-one with them or as a group, and have them work alongside.
Yeah, and art and music. We really believe, Al, when we built the Rock, we really wanted it. I mean, music was a huge outlet for Al, and music and art is an incredible point of expression for youth as well, to start to get some of that stuff out in another way. So we really believe that's the voice of youth, to be able to use points of expression like that. So the Rock offers that as well. So I think there is some critical components we have in terms of supporting youth in making changes in drug use, but it's still very difficult.
Yep. LivingRock.ca, you've probably been seeing it all throughout the program, LivingRock.ca. Al, I want to go back to you and talk about more of your story, because you talk about the big brother, okay, bigger than life, using for 6 years with the pot. Then life changes, start delving into other things. Your life of insanity, what brings you out?
Brings me out.
What brings you out? I'm sorry. What was your bottom?
Well, I started getting into, like I was saying earlier, meth and speed and different types of stimulant type drugs, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. I mean, I started traveling around, as Karen mentioned earlier. I was involved with bands, playing in bands and music and stuff like that, and I was in that culture, so entrenched in that culture, that it hit me that I was, at one point when I was about 22, I realized that I'm not going to survive this. That same brother that I was talking about before, he was used to hang with a notorious bike gang in Peterborough, and he had been the person I really looked up to, and also the person that got me into doing drugs in the beginning. He had made a real life change in his life. He had committed his life to following Christianity, and it was really through him that I made that decision. My life had just gone to the bottom. I had my car I got in an accident with my car, impaired driving. My apartment got broken into. All my drug stash got stolen. It sounds like a blues song, right? My girlfriend dumped me, because she realized I was a loser. I wasn't Karen, by the way. And it went from there to being, like there was nothing. And I remember thinking, my brother had told me he was a Christian. At first I thought he'd done some bad acid, he had just something that had popped. But after a while, I realized that what he had was something that I really wanted, and it's something I needed. Whether it was true or not, I had no idea. I wasn't raised in a religious home or anything like that, but I remember going over and visiting with him and his wife, and it hit me one day after I tried to argue with them that they were wrong and messed up, and it hit me one day that what they had is what I needed. And so I made that commitment myself. And I mean, I still struggled. I struggled for a while after that with, because all of my friends and all of my social network was we're all druggies. We're all into the whole drug culture, and if you weren't into that, you were really. I think there's a whole straight edge thing now where youth can be into, be cool almost and be not involved with substance abuse. But for in my generation, if you weren't, you were a complete outcast. You were a loser, right? I had to make a real break and say, you know what, I have to break ties for a while. So when I came to Hamilton after going to college, trying to change my life, that's when I realized that there was a need for something like Living Rock, and we started the Rock. And we saw before that I worked for a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center for over 4 years as a counselor there. And then after that, got into starting the Rock and going forward, working with youth that were incarcerated, and but
You wanted kids to be able to come that didn't see it as a problem. We
Yeah.
wanted a place where they didn't
Actually,
have to come with the problem.
Actually, guys, we're totally out of time.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to talk about Soup Fest, but I will tell you to go to livingrock.ca, and please, we'll have you back again at another time. For Karen, Al, and everyone else here at the Advocate, I'm Glenn Allen, still trying to learn how to talk. Thanks very much for watching. Good night.